Okay, picture this. It's the end of the quarter. The PR team is sitting around the table in the C-suite reporting meeting. You've just walked executive leadership through this massive slide deck, packed with mention counts, sentiment percentages, millions of impressions, the whole shebang. Everyone listens politely. And then, someone at the head of the table leans forward and asks the dreaded question. But what did it actually do for the business? Dead silence. If you're a communications professional, you know that exact sinking feeling, right? It's that immediate, brutal disconnect between legacy PR metrics that basically just measure noise and the actual, tangible business outcomes your leadership team cares about.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive pain point for communications teams, upgrading the PR scorecard. Because let's be honest, for far too long, brand reputation monitoring has been stuck in the past, rewarding raw activity over genuine impact. So we're going to unpack some brilliant insights from Matt Allison's recent deep dive to show you exactly how top-tier teams are finally ditching the clip counts. We're going to learn how to transition from simply measuring how much noise you made to proactively engineering your brand's reputation. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the C-suite disconnect, then why legacy metrics fail, 5 KPIs that matter, calculating the impact score, the generative AI shift, and finally, engineer your reputation. Let's get into it.
Section 1, the C-suite disconnect. Measuring activity versus measuring impact.
All right, let's dive right in. The pressure on senior communications leaders is rising exponentially right now. And why is that? Well, because tracking mere activity, how many articles you got or the sheer volume of audience reach, is actually costing them credibility. They're documenting what already happened in a world where reputation can literally shift in a matter of hours. And this data point explains exactly why that pressure is so incredibly high. 56%. According to a September 2025 Pew Research Center survey, only 56% of U.S. adults say they have a lot or even just some trust in information from national news organizations. That number is down an astonishing 20 points since 2016. So what does this mean for comms teams? It means every single reputational data point you track is landing in a highly suspicious, historically low-trust environment. Trust itself is fragile across all ages and demographics, and in this environment, every single narrative carries intense weight. Section 2. Why legacy metrics fail. The structural flaws of the old paradigm.
Look, the traditional reporting culture was built for a bygone era. It was designed for a time when handing over a printed quarterly press summary was considered good enough. It fundamentally answers the wrong questions. The old way relied on legacy metrics like mention volume, generic sentiment, and AVEs, or advertising value equivalents. These metrics constantly confuse motion with progress. Think about it. Mention volume rewards quantity over quality. Generic sentiment treats every reference equally, even if your brand is barely a footnote. And AVs? They compare earned media to paid placements, which is a comparison formally rejected by the Barcelona Principles 4.0. Compare that to modern KPIs. Narrative formation, brand-centric sentiment, and dynamic share of voice. These are forward-looking. They map directly to business outcomes. They actually answer the VP's real question. What story is forming about us, and is it helping or hurting?
Section 3, 5 KPIs that matter. The core stack for modern teams. So how do we fix it? Well, we focus on a small number of metrics that actually do real work. Metrics that are outcome-driven, impact-driven, and directly predict reputational risk and growth. We're talking about narrative momentum, brand-centric sentiment, dynamic share of voice, publication tiering, and AI perception. Each of these layers addresses a specific flaw in the old way of doing things. Let's unpack how each metric actually works in practice, starting with the very first one.
First up is narrative momentum. Remember, reputation does not live in individual articles. It lives in the storylines those articles create when you view them together. Tracking narrative momentum means looking at which clusters of coverage are gaining steam or fading away. This is your early warning radar. A team applying narrative intelligence can spot a hostile storyline forming days, sometimes even weeks, before it hits mainstream coverage. That is the crucial difference between proactively shaping a story and just reactively doing damage control. Imagine stopping a PR crisis before the CEO even knows it's brewing.
Next is brand-centric sentiment. As we noted earlier, generic sentiment is incredibly misleading. A completely neutral article about industry pricing that just happens to drop your company's name somewhere in paragraph 8 is not the same as a glowing feature article that positions your brand as the undisputed category leader. Brand-centric scoring accounts for your prominence. Are you in the headline? Are you just a passing mention? How are you actually positioned relative to competitors in that specific text?
Then we have dynamic share of voice. Now, static share of voice, saying we had 30% of the mentions this month, is honestly just a vanity metric. Dynamic share of voice tracks how your position moves against competitors over rolling time periods, and most importantly, across specific narratives. You could be totally winning the internet on generic mentions, but losing the share of voice on the one specific storyline that actually drives product sales. Fourth is publication tiering, because let's face it, not all mentions are created equal. One prominently positioned feature in a top-tier business publication is going to shape investor and analyst perception infinitely more than 50 random mentions on low-authority blogs. By weighting coverage by domain authority, audience size, and relevance, communications leaders can quickly prioritize exactly what needs to be amplified, what needs a response, and what can be completely ignored. And finally, AI perception. This is the absolute newest and arguably the most consequential layer of the entire stack. When a stakeholder asks ChatGPT or Gemini about your brand, the model generates an answer based on earned coverage and fresh sources. Tracking how these systems describe you reveals the massive gap that often exists between human media coverage and machine interpretation. And that gap exists because AI doesn't just read one article. It aggregates and synthesizes the entire historical narrative over time. Monitoring this layer is no longer optional, it is absolutely crucial. Section 4, Calculating the Impact Score, a single number for executive leadership.
All right, so you've got these 5 incredibly powerful metrics. But you can't just walk into a board meeting tossing a scattered handful of data points around. How do we combine these into a single board-ready number? Well, it all comes down to weighting. Think of it like a recipe for an impact score. In an illustrative mathematical breakdown, you might have narrative momentum weighted at 30%, brand-centric sentiment at 25%, dynamic share of voice at 20%, publication tier at 15%, and AI perception at 10%. Now, these weights aren't set in stone. They can and definitely should be shifted based on your business's unique risks. A brand facing heavy regulatory scrutiny, for instance, might weigh AI perception and publication tier much higher. The beauty here isn't the specific formula. It's that you finally have one composite number that moves in a meaningful way when something material actually happens. But having that number isn't quite enough. It's all about the cadence of review. We have to stop treating measurement as a quarterly artifact, because by the time a quarterly report lands, the narrative is already completely set. Instead, modern teams use a much faster loop. Real-time alerts for narrative shifts, daily reviews of the impact score, weekly checks on sentiment, and monthly tracking of AI perception drift. This faster loop empowers leaders to intervene while a story is still forming, which is exactly when influence is cheapest and most effective.
Section 5, the generative AI shift, the new accountability layer.
Generative AI has quietly and rapidly become a primary reputation surface. These large language models are out there synthesizing your earned coverage into answers from millions of users every single day in real time. To really anchor the urgency of this, consider this data point: 58%. Pew Research found that ChatGPT use among Americans roughly doubled between 2023 and 2025. Today, 58% of adults under 30 report using it. This definitively proves that a massive, growing share of your stakeholders, we're talking customers, recruits, investors, are hearing about your brand from a machine first, long before they ever visit your website or read a journalist article. If you aren't shaping what the AI says about you, you are flying totally blind.
Section 6. Engineer your reputation. From reporting to action.
The communications leaders who are truly pulling ahead are making a fundamental mindset shift. They are moving from merely documenting what already happened, shipping those long lists of mentions, to proactively shaping the future. They're building workflows where signal-to-noise ratios are tight and metrics actually drive immediate executive decisions. You no longer have to settle for reporting on the noise. You can build a system that detects narratives before they set, scores sentiment in the context of your specific brand, and tracks how the world's most powerful AI models are defining you to the public. If you want to stop counting mentions and start shaping outcomes, there is a better way forward. See what KPI-driven reputation engineering looks like when the dashboard finally measures what matters at handraise.com. But before you go, ask yourself, if your CEO asked you today what your PR strategy actually did for the business this quarter, would you have the data to prove it, or would you just be handing them a stack of news clippings?